whatever ways you do in your work or in your presence in your life, whether it's looking after families or in your professional world or through artistry or however you bring your gifts, to the world. Chances are you're the kind of person who's interested in how to get the most out of it. And I think grief is a really important part of our journey as humans to really learn how to not just survive, but actually how to master, how to actually find some creativity and some levity around it, which is about really getting back energy. And we're going to talk about that today. That's one of the tenets of sort of the yogic perspective that I'm going to share with you today. So let's see what people are saying. Okay, so I have to scroll a little bit, so bear with me. All right, so Carolyn's in Etobicoke. Dana from the San Francisco Bay Area, welcome. And Dana, thank you for that. And, Dinah, like dynamic. Thank you for that. Beautiful. From Baden, Ontario, Jennifer is. Eileen's in North York. Curious about new ways to deal with grief. Yep. And I know, Eileen, you're already an expert in grief. So I love this because, we're all learning, we're all experimenting, we're all growing. So whether you're coming to this as a professional or whether you're coming, as yourself, there's always going to be something that we can learn and grow, from each other. Anne's from the Junction. And your mom passed away just over a month ago. I'm so sorry to hear that, Anne. Just looking for ways to move through the grief. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a perfect reason to be here. We're going to hold space for you today. Valerie, no problem, Valerie. You just enjoy and take what you can today. We're glad you're here. Justine's looking for some peace and grief. Yeah, that's a big one. Anna's in downtown Toronto. What else have we got? Jill, hi Jill from Oakville. Whoops, it scrolled. I lost you. New perspectives. Okay. Excellent. Shannon's from Burlington. Here with professional curiosities. Anna, personal situation. Son and wife have lost their baby. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh, wait. It scrolled again. I lost it. Where were we? That's one little thing about the chat is when everybody's putting things in, which is exactly what I asked you to do, it goes like out of my view. So if I lose the comment, my apologies, and I will come back if I can. From Ancaster. Okay, so far, yeah, Anna, that's so tough. Okay. Roxy, welcome from Oakville. Lost your dad. I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah. So strategies, right? So you're here because you've either experienced grief in the past. You're here because you're professionally curious about how to support other people through grief. You're here because you are currently going through an experience that is difficult, and you're looking for what? Like, get a little more clear with me, if you will. Like, what do you want a bigger experience? What does a bigger perspective mean? Or what does what does that mean? I'm really curious, and I appreciate you letting me get into this questioning so early. I'm going to keep talking about, I'm going to move on and share some information. But first, this is a circle, right? When we come together as humans, we're creating this energetic field together, and we all benefit from it, myself included. So let's open that with some heart intention together. And I want to say that, it takes courage to show up in a space like this, to hear about something that can be very heavy. Grief can be a very challenging experience, as we know. Since this is basically my first webinar, I thought I would just start with something easy and light, right? Like grief, death, easy peasy, right? But no, in all seriousness, it is, it can be really heavy, and it can be activating to hear about it and to talk about it. So first and foremost, please, please, please take excellent care of yourself. Just if you need to take space, you want water, you just take care of yourself, whatever it is that you need during this hour. I'm gonna do my best to stick to the hour. And we've got some new faces coming in. Welcome, everybody. Okay. So for those of you that are hopping on, I'm just asking everybody to drop in the chat what brings you here, what you're looking for a bigger experience of in relation to grief. Okay. All right. So I would like to just open the circle with a mantra. So I'm sharing with you today let's say an expanded version of how we can navigate grief in a masterful way, in a loving way. And a lot of this, what I'm sharing with you, is going to be coming from the Kundalini Yoga lineage perspective, so which is a particular way of navigating the world, I guess, and I will talk more about that in a bit. It's also informed by my professional experience over the last 15 years, being a mental health professional, and really enjoying my work and my clients and learning a lot from them. So you're getting a sort of, I don't know, complex, I guess, or amalgamated, maybe is a better word, perspective on navigating grief. And from the Kundalini Yoga perspective, we use a mantra, and it's Ong Namo Gurudev Namo. You don't have to know it. I'm just sharing it with you. I'm going to chant that, and we're going to use that to open up the space and open up the circle. Okay? So I'm just going to invite you, if you know this mantra, then you're very welcome to chant it as well. If you don't, you can just pretend that you do and make sounds. It's still going to move some energy for you. Or if you just want to listen, that's absolutely okay as well. So I'm just going to invite you to drop down into your heart space for a moment. Take a nice deep inhale and exhale. And let's just see if we can leave the day behind. Leave behind what has already taken place today and bring all of your energy into this now moment. And my intention for all of us here, my intention is that you are going to hear something today that you need to hear. Something that's coming through with a loving frequency that is meant for you. You don't have to take in everything I'm saying today. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying today. But you just take what works for you. That's my intention and my prayer for this space and for all of you here, and for anybody watching the recording as well. So from your heart space, because we are creating this space together, please go ahead and just give yourself an intention. Give yourself a prayer for what it is that you would like from today's masterclass. Breathe into that. We've had some words come up already: peace, perspective, expansion. And then I'm going to invite you to say an intention or a prayer for everybody else in the group. What is it that you want or hope that everybody else here is going to be able to experience or receive today? And I'm going to chant to open our circle. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Great. Thank you. If you feel called, then please place in the chat what your prayer was for everybody. Karen's here. It's a social worker. Excellent. Interested in thoughts on grief. Experienced loss by suicide in 2 family members. Okay, yep. So grief can be traumatic, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about today as well. Cass is here. Welcome, welcome. Okay, great. Let me share my screen and we'll get into it. I'm going to sorry, 2 things at once here. I'm going to invite you to see if you can keep your questions until the end. I will leave time at the end for questions. Having said that, though, if you have a burning question and you want to put it in the chat, Carolyn's going to help me manage and just keep an eye on what's going on there. And actually, can I even open the chat when I'm sharing? Let me see. Chat. There we go. Okay. All right. So can everybody see the screen? Thumbs up for me. Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, so this is, as you know, the Sacred Grief Recovery Roadmap. And my name is Andrea Skitch. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a death doula, recently trained. I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher. I'm a mom. I'm a partner. I'm a person. And I'm really excited to be here with every single one of you and everybody watching the replay. I'm so grateful for you to be part of this today. We have our introductions, which we've already started with, our welcomes, which we've started with. I'm going to talk about the grief process today from this perspective, which again is a combination of this yogic perspective, as well as just my experience in working with trauma and working with grief in the mental health field. We're going to talk about the grief recovery path. And this is in particular, I think, probably what you're here to hear the most. So I'm not going to spend as much time on the grief process, partly because it will overlap with a lot of the information that we already have kind of in mainstream psychology. But the grief recovery path in particular, I think, is where this diverts a little bit. So I'm going to spend a bit more time there to give you some of this information. And then if there's time, I would love for you to actually experience what I'm going to be talking about today with a really short meditation. So hopefully there's time for that. And then there'll be some time for questions, and I will be sharing with you a really exciting opportunity that I would love to share with you near the end. So again, welcome to this circle. And again, each of you have your own unique journey and your own experience with grief. What I'm going to give you today is a roadmap. And a roadmap is just a map. It's not what you're actually doing in real life, right? You remember the days when you got into the car to go on an actual road trip and you looked at a physical map? It's like that. It's like the way you actually go may not be what the map says, right? You might go to the west first. You might go to the east first. You might go, in loop-de-loop circles. And that's all perfect and fine and good for your particular journey. So it's not going to look like anybody else's. But the roadmap does give you a sense of direction, basically. And in particular, at a time in life when it can feel very directionless, right? Okay, let's see, I've covered all this. Who is this for? Well, I kind of mentioned a few minutes ago, you're probably somebody who is here because you are a helper, a healer, a creative person, a sensitive person, and ultimately a leader in your world, whether that be with your family or in your profession, or in any which way. People who are interested in really getting the most out of life and really experiencing an expanded version of themselves. That's really who this information is for. And a little bit about me. I know a lot of you already, which is such a blessing to see your faces again, but some of you don't know me. And so I am I've been doing mental health work with my clients in private practice for over 15 years. And my own personal journey with grief comes into this as I've been on my own health recovery road with certain chronic health issues. I have discovered along the way that intergenerational trauma and grief in particular has been almost like stuck energy in my system. And though it's not the only factor that I've had to uncover, it's been a very significant one in my own healing journey. So I'm really interested in how we can, find some relief, because I've been blessed to have the help along the way to find and actually experience some relief in that. So that's partly what brought me on this journey of figuring out what is grief and how do we actually alchemize it? How do we actually recover from it? And my intention for today I've already shared with you, and we did our tune-in, so I'm ahead of myself. Okay, so basically in a nutshell, these are the 3 chapters that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Conscious grieving is what I'm calling the approach to experiencing your grief with your eyes open, with a bit of direction and a bit of knowledge behind you, so that as you go through the experience of grief, again, personal to you, looks very different depending on your situation or many different factors, you're doing it with a conscious intention. And that's really what I want to teach you here today. The grieving process is what starts when the loss is either anticipated or has taken place, right? So whether it's the loss of a relationship, whether it's a divorce, a loss of a home, a loss of your identity, a loss due to death, a loss of a loved one, for example, a friendship. I mean, there are so many versions of how loss takes place in our lives, and that's what actually breaks the structure of your reality. That's how significant loss can be. So that ignites this grieving process that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And then at some point or another, there's a turning point or an invitation, let's say, to pivot. And there's a very important decision that you have to consciously make in order to make that pivot. And I'm going to talk about that as well. And once you make that decision, even though you may have to revisit that time and time again, that's when the grief recovery process can begin. And we're going to talk about what that actually looks like. But the key takeaway for what is grief recovery, is that it's the perspective that you can actually integrate the change that comes from the loss, right? From the shift in your reality. And that's what I really want to emphasize today, because that's what's coming from these teachings. Okay, I'm just going to quickly look at the chat. Okay. A few principles, things that you want to know, perhaps you've heard this before, about the grieving process, right? So again, this is what we're kind of potentially thrust into, right? We don't ask for our loved ones to have to cross over. We don't ask for, our jobs to disappear or whatever the thing is, right? Typically, we don't sign up we're like, yeah, sure, I just want to go on a grieving journey. That sounds like fun. We're thrust into it, but it is a necessary part of evolving. It's absolutely necessary to evolve. Life and death and rebirth is an inherent pattern in this reality, on this planet, right? We see it every day when the seasons change, for example, right? Now, I'm not a tree. I don't know what trees feel. I'm sure they actually do feel something. I'd like to believe that based on what we know. I don't know what their grieving looks like or if they do grieve, but I know for sure that humans do. And that has to do with the fact that we are meaning-making machines, and we are also social, right? So we connect with others, and that's how we experience ourselves in this reality. So grieving is a very important part of that. So that's the first point. Grief is a necessary part of growth in life. Any profound loss can trigger the grief process and to take you to the next level of your incarnation. That's a belief from this particular perspective. You could also just see it as lifetime. Another point is that grief is physiological. I really want to emphasize this. Yes, it's also emotional and mental and spiritual, of course, but the physical body is the holder of time and space in your experience. You are many things, and your physical body is one part of you. And that physical body is the holder of this time and space, right? This is the reality, this is the plane that your body navigates. And it requires the time, it requires to metabolize. And so grief is part of that metabolization process. And this is why the yoga in particular from this approach is so key in being able to navigate this from a conscious, evolving, beneficial, I guess you could say, place. Okay. Grief recovery happens best in community. So again, we are social creatures and we understand ourselves, our identity in this human experience through our relationship with others primarily, right? As we grow and as we adult more, we gain the capacity to then also reflect with ourselves who we want to be and who we are. But we always need, those safe people in our lives, our friends who can, reflect back who they see us to be. And we need those positive anchors in our lives to navigate grief. That doesn't mean that that's the only way to navigate grief. It's very valid if you happen to be an introverted person and you like to take time and do these things by yourself. That's not wrong at all. But at some point, a community aspect is really important for really stepping into this new version of yourself, which we're going to talk more about as well. And another principle is that grief is something you can actually recover from through this integration of the past, present, and future when you do it from a conscious place. Okay, so that's kind of, I think, what makes this approach a little bit different, maybe. I know that the wonderful Elizabeth Kubler-Ross perspective of the 5 stages, and then I think she added a 6th stage, if I'm not mistaken, around transformation is really beautiful, and it's created a foundation for us in modern psychology to understand that grief is very real and important and valid. But I think what I love seeing in this approach is that this is ancient wisdom meeting our modern day trauma-informed, somatic-based perspectives, right? This idea that we can actually create new neural networks, healthy neural networks within our brain system that can support more adaptive and positive experiences that we carry forward, right? We can actually enter a new state, basically, is what I'm saying. Now, that doesn't negate the path, right? It doesn't negate the fact that it's not easy, and I don't for a second want anything that I say today to dismiss the intensity or the very real suffering that can go with grief. I just want to also balance it with this idea that that recovery is possible. It's not only possible, it's most likely what you want, right? At least if you're here, that's probably what you do want. So this is a beautiful image that I found that I just think, kind of exemplifies what I'm trying to say about the fact that even though I'm giving you this linear path around navigating grief, in reality, it's much more like a spiral. And, you'll visit these places again and again, these different states of being in relation to your grief, and that's totally normal. That's totally part of it. So allowing yourself that reality is important. And I love that this artist has put in, begin when you're ready, move at your own pace, and lean into consistency. It's another reason I put this image here, and I think it's the lean into consistency part is going to come up a little bit later when we talk about the actual grief recovery part, right? We're talking about the grief process part now. We're going to talk about the grief recovery part soon. So here we are in the grief process, right? Whatever is lost that has broken the structure of your reality is a catalyst for this grief process. And this is why it brings up so much powerlessness, because again, it's not something we sign up for willingly, usually. Something happens, right? Or is going to happen. And it thrusts us into this process, whether we like it or not. And very understandably and very appropriately, the shock, denial, and numbness will likely begin your path in one form or another. And that's very protective, actually, because your body needs time, as we said already, to integrate new information that is so profound for your experience that it's going to slow you down and put you in survival mode just to keep going. And this is just something to be aware of, because when somebody is in this place, you don't want to rush them. You want to allow that protective mechanism to do its job. And unfortunately, or I guess the reality, is that a lot of times, for example, if you've lost a loved one, then it's in this window of time that you're often having to make big decisions. And that's part of what can make it such a difficult time on top of other difficulties, right? Because you're having to make decisions that are really important, but that you're in this state of shock, right? So just being sensitive to that, as you're helping people through grief, as you notice yourself move through grief, and just try to be really compassionate about that, I would say. And I made the point here that this can last up to 90 days. Don't marry yourself too much to that timeline, please. Again, we even revisit shock. We'll come back to it sometimes, and that's okay too. But just to give you some kind of guideline, up to 90 days is sort of reasonable. And then comes the next phase, the falling apart. And this is the messy time, right? This is the time when the protectors inside of you are tired, and rightly so, and the floodgates open. And this is the phase that oftentimes people really dread, which is really understandable, right? We're not particularly comfortable with big emotions. I would say, maybe that's my waspy background speaking. I'm sure it partly is, but I feel like in our society in general, we don't really tend to make a lot of room for big emotions, big feelings, So this is a tough stage in and of its own right. And you've heard this before, right? Sadness, anger, fear, self-doubt, confusion, reactivity, fogginess, powerlessness, all that really difficult stuff can come up. And you can move in and out of this phase or in and out of these states. They can change really quickly, they can last, and then they can cause added distress because of how we interpret what's happening, right? I hear lots of negative beliefs coming up around this, like I'm weak, or I should be over this, or those are the two that come to mind right now. I'm sure you can think of others, right? Really, what's happening here from an energetic perspective is that all of that built up energy, right, that has been ignited from the loss, from the reaction to the loss, from the earthquake of your life, it's all like I wish I had a scientific term here, but when energy is held and then it's released, right? It's like that. It's like there's a polarity there, right? So the energy is like built up and pent up, and then it has to move. So it's actually very healthy, right, for these emotions to come and to move. And of course, if you happen to be in this place, then you want to be consciously making time and space for these emotions the best that you can, so that hopefully they're a little less likely to, like, knock you off when you maybe have to be doing your presentation at work, or I don't know, whatever the thing is, right? You also may not get a choice, which is hard and humbling. But do whatever you can, is what I'm trying to say, to really take care of yourself and make space, for those emotions. And just naming them is a really beautiful practice. When you notice something come up in your body or in your mind or in your tears, just saying the name of what you think that is, sadness, it's a powerful practice. It really is. And I want to add that what's actually falling away here, so there's grief around what is lost, who is lost, but there's also grief around who you were, right? Who you thought you were in the world. And that sense of self, that sense of identity, that has also been shattered. And we want to honor that and notice that. People talk about, being in the rubble, navigating the rubble of what's happened. And the one thing I'll say is that while it's extremely uncomfortable to be in a place like that and scary, it's also the most creative place you can be, because the potential to create any reality from a void, essentially, is the most ripe place you can find yourself. And that brings us to the next chapter. But I want to show you this graphic because I thought it was so beautiful. This idea that, like, there's also an art to doing this, right? There's an art to moving through grief and loss. It doesn't look the same for everybody. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. But there's a creativity to it. There's an intelligence to it. You are already designed to do this, right? So it's just trusting yourself and igniting whatever it is that you need to trust in yourself and move one step at a time through it. So, okay. All right. So here's where we're moving into the next phase. That crossroad I was talking about, that pivotal moment, that opportunity where you have to surrender to the experience you're having, is a pivotal moment that you have with yourself. Nobody can do this for you. When you're in that void, you're in the rubble, you know what's all around you, you've experienced a breadth of intense energy running through your system. Hopefully you've felt support from people around you in that phase, or at the very least from yourself or your guides, or however you relate to the world and your resources. Then you have to decide something. And that something is, are you going to continue to try to make things look, feel, or seem the same as they were before this loss? Or are you going to surrender to the reality that there is a new reality, and that you get a say in what that reality looks like from moving forward? And people really struggle with this. This is where it can be triggering to hear this, because it's not that you don't have to like what's happened. You don't have to agree with what's happened. You don't have to let go of those emotions that are valid and important information. It's just, what are you going to do with the energy is really what this is. It's code for what are you going to do with all that energy, right? The teaching here is that we live in a polarity planet, and I can't think of many things that are more polarizing in terms of our experience as grief and loss. It ignites an energy, a life force energy inside of you. And of course, sometimes that energy is going to come up as despair, as rage, as disappointment, as blame, and all these heavy things that are very human to experience. But in that very same breath is the opportunity, because this is how the energetics work here. The opportunity, maybe not in that moment per se, but ultimately that energy is still energy. It's still life force energy, you see? And you get to engage with it, right? Maybe not at every moment, it won't feel that powerful, but ultimately at some point, you know, you get to reclaim what you're going to do with that life force energy flowing through you. And a really beautiful way to direct that energy is to honor what is lost. And this, I think, is a really big missing piece in our culture. You know, we don't make a lot of space and time for rituals, in my opinion, in my experience. I don't know about you guys, but you know, creating a ritual, creating a way of honoring what is lost is a really constructive use of that energy. And so we'll talk more about that, but I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. And then the grief recovery begins from this place, or begins again. You know, again, you might have to revisit this multiple times, maybe at different stages of your life as well, right? If you experience, you know, significant grief and loss in your 20s, let's say, you know, it's very normal and understandable to have to revisit that later in life, right? Your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, who knows, right? But the grief recovery process is this conscious decision-making process. And it's where you make the decision to accept that the life you have will not be the way it was before, as painful as that it could be. And you begin a journey of integration. And for those of you who do work with yourself or work with others around trauma, I'm sure you're seeing a big overlap here, right? It's the same thing. It's the same process. So we could call it grief, you know, and grief is a big part of it. We could call it trauma. You can call it what you want, right? It's breaking the structure. That's what it is. That's what we're talking about. And honoring that, and honoring yourself in the process. Integration needs to happen on a body level, a mental level, an emotional level, and a spiritual level from this perspective, for that to be as beneficial as you may want it to be. And why are we doing all that work? Like, why go into this sort of like sobering honesty with yourself? It's because it's giving you the opportunity to step into a more authentic version of you. Anytime life decides that it's going to shake you up, whether it's your choice or not, like in other situations, I don't know, maybe you choose to change your job or choose to move or whatever, you know, or whether it's something that happens and it's not something you asked for, anything that's stripping away your sense of security is also stripping away your sense of who you used to be. And then again, it's opening a door to who you want to be. And by that, I mean what feels most resonant with you, right? This is where you get to sort of observe and reflect. Okay, well, am I still living, you know, in the expectations of others? Am I still taking forward with me stories and expectations and roles that I never really stopped to think to myself, do I want to do that? Do I want to be that person in my family or at work? Because the dynamics at your work will be the same as in your family until you notice that. Hint. Okay, so it's all worth it, is what I'm trying to say. It's worth being curious, you know. Grief recovery is integrating the change, right? You see what I'm saying? Okay, so let's say you get to this place, right? Let's say you're open to this idea that you can make decisions about where you want to go with all this energy in your life, asked or not asked for. From this perspective, and this is one of the reasons I love this perspective so much, is that there's an invitation here, or actually not even an invitation, I'm going to put it more strongly, a necessity that you raise your vitality first. So if you're in this place, right? Or let's say you've got a toe in this place. Don't do anything else but focus on raising your life force energy. And I want, if there's any therapists and healers in the room, I really want you to hear this as well, because a lot of times when we support our clients and change is not happening, a very simple reason for that is there's not enough energy in the system. Okay, so raising the vitality is a really key portion of this, or key part of this approach to grief recovery. It's also necessary if you want to just make small changes in your life or habit changes. I had a conversation with a client recently about this, and we were talking about habit changes, and it came up. It reminded me, right? You have to have enough energy in the tank, right? Why? Because you are always navigating your own subconscious. You are running on your programming. We all are, myself included, all the time. So if you want to overcome, or you want to basically deal with the pressure of the internal programming, then you have to have enough energy in the tank to be able to do that, right? Think about a night where you've had an amazing sleep and you just woke up and made yourself a beautiful breakfast. Are you more likely to then do the thing you want to do that day, or that you told yourself you were going to do, like go for a walk or work on that project or whatever the thing is, right? Versus you had a crappy sleep, you woke up, you had your whatever you consider to be not a great breakfast for you, your coffee, whatever. And then you're like, do you have the motivation to do the thing you told yourself you were going to do that day? No, right? You have to have enough life force energy in the tank. And this is where the yoga comes in as such a beautiful and very powerful, very quick tool. And that's why I recommend it for people, and not only who are navigating grief, but also doing any of their own healing work. Because otherwise you can kind of get stuck there, Okay. Moving along, accessing your neutral mind through observation and curiosity. This is another important phase of the grief recovery process. Essentially, it's like self-psychology, It's allowing yourself to be curious about your own reactions and not judging yourself for them. It's a process of observation, right? And getting real with yourself about how you are navigating the world and what works for you and what doesn't, right? Honoring your history and calibrating to your current self. That is the ultimate takeaway here, I think, or something to ponder, let's say. This grief recovery process is really about looking at, now that I've experienced this massive thing, right? What am I going to do with that? What am I going to take forward from my life? What have I learned about who I am and what I value in this life from that experience? You would not have been heartbroken or shattered or shocked if there wasn't something in there that mattered deeply to you, right? So what is that? Who is that? What did that person offer you? What did they bring you? What do you want to take forward? What from their legacy resonates with you now, right? And again, this is very personal, right? Grief and loss is a huge term for a complex, multi-version reality. For each one of you, it's going to be different. But that's kind of the idea here. This is part of the process of recovering. How will I honor my history and calibrate to the new me? And then deciding and creating what you want a bigger experience of. My teacher taught me this, and I love it when I still hear recordings of her say it. What do you want a bigger experience of? Didn't I ask you that in the beginning of this webinar, right? What do you want a bigger experience of? Getting really sober and clear with yourself about what that is really an important part of this rebirthing of you, right? What do you want a bigger experience of? Do you want more connection? Do you want more access to your creativity? Do you want more money, more resources in your life, right? Whatever it is, if you don't even ask, or you don't get clear about that with yourself, you're not as likely to allow it in or work toward it, right? all you have is the present moment. And the more you can attune your own field, your own energy field, to vibrate with what you want, the more likely you are to experience it, and the more likely you are to attract opportunities that are in sync with that, right? I can't think of a more powerful manifesting, to use that term, experience than going through grief and loss, because it will, dare I say, force you to meet yourself, right? If you let it. And I think you're probably pretty great to meet. Here's another way to just visualize what I'm talking about. The conscious grief cycle, I'm calling it. Think about it like an inhale and an exhale, an expansion and a contraction. If you look at it, starting from the top here, where the catalyst is the loss itself or the anticipated loss, and the exhale is the contraction, the conservation of energy, and the deconstruction of what you know to be true. And this is what we're referring to today as the grieving process. And it's a very sacred process to go through. And then, as I said, there's this choice point, right? This almost like exhaustion, right? And there's a choice that you get to make. And you may need to revisit that multiple times. And when you do, you get to make that beautiful inhale with this energy. And this is the grief recovery process, that expansion, expression of you, construction, creativity of what it is you want to experience more of, you see? And again, this might be this might be a layered experience. You might go through this many, many times, and that's absolutely okay. And I hope you'll allow that. Okay. This is just another graphic that I really love to sort of exemplify, going back to this idea of needing enough life force energy in your system, or prana as it's called from this perspective. You need enough prana in the system to be able to do this inversion, right? To take the energy that is hidden, if you will, or maybe not so hidden, depending on what you're experiencing, in the experience, and actually utilize it in a conscious way. Right? You need enough energy to do that. How do you raise your vitality? Well, there's lots of ways to do it, but obviously in my perspective that I'm sharing with you today, Kundalini Yoga is a very complete mechanism and technology to be able to do that. And it's for everybody. So I didn't really get into talking too much about what Kundalini Yoga is, and I don't actually think I really need to here, because you can look that up, but I want you to take from this that it is basically for everybody. It doesn't matter what your skill level is, it doesn't matter what your physiological abilities are, it doesn't matter what religion you are or what belief system you have. It's for everybody. It's an energy management system, let's put it that way in the simplest form. That helps you to balance your 10 bodies, which you have. Your physical body is one of them, so that you can move that energy through you and then make choices and make discernments according to you, your most authentic you. That's what it affords you. Of course, also your diet, using herbs and hydration, all of these things that are good for your body are going to raise your vitality. Connecting to your loved ones and your community, creating creative practice, doing what you love for the sake of feeling good, dancing, singing, chanting, moving, all of these things raise the vitality, raise the prana in your system. Okay. And just to sort of end off this portion of the talk, let's remember, what's the point of all this? Why do we go through these things? What did we sign up for when we came here? Carolyn and I talk about this. She's smiling. What did we sign up for? Do you ever have those moments where you're like, what did I sign up for? It's really hard to be human sometimes, right? Well, I'm going to offer you perspective on what you signed up for. You signed up here because you wanted to experience more love. When you're in the etheric form of yourself, you don't get a physical body with sensations to experience this version, these frequencies, right, of love and expansion. And then you get to actually show it as well, right, through this body, through your actions. You get to care for your neighbor, right, who needs a coffee. You get to talk to your, hopefully you get to talk to your loved one before they pass if you're lucky. You get to hug somebody and really connect with them heart to heart. Like, this is what you signed up for. This is why we go through the hard stuff, because again, we live on a polarity planet and you don't get one without the other, right? I know we want to sometimes not feel all this stuff, or we want to we want relief, and we should have that, but there is a purpose and a reason, and I'm offering you this as a perspective, and that is to experience yourself as a loving being, basically. So I like to ask myself, sometimes in dark moments, how can I bring more love into this situation, right? Or if I'm feeling overwhelmed or unsure what to do next. And by the way, bringing more love in, I'll just add this for those of you who may suffer from a little bit of the people-pleasing stuff. I certainly know that pattern a little bit. Showing more love doesn't mean abandoning yourself, right? Showing more love means, how can I get bigger energetically, in fact? And I'm going to do a whole course on this one day. But how can I get bigger energetically to offer more of my own vibration to the people that I love? Right? Rather than doing what I think they need me to do or want me to do. So just going to offer you that little thing right there.